Built for builders, from beginners to pros, this is where great backyards begin. Welcome to the Ultimate Deck Podcast, your source for backyard building tips, product breakdowns, and pro advice from the front lines of the industry. Here are your hosts, Shane Chapman and Wade Laurent.
Welcome back to the Ultimate Deck Podcast. Just Shane today. Wade is unavailable, so you just get me. Sorry about that. So we won't waste any time. We'll just get straight to it. Today we're talking about 7 efficient tips for you when you're building a composite deck or a composite deck that are going to save you money with a little bit of extra planning. So let's get right after it. Number 1, work with the deck board lengths that are available. So with composite decking, it's pretty much universal that they're available in 12 foot, 16 foot, and 20 foot lengths. You can pretty much find those lengths anywhere. Of course, those can be cut to shorter lengths. So if you need 10 foot boards, you're going to cut 20s down in half, etc. But often the solid edge boards are only available in 20 foot lengths, sometimes 16s. That can vary a little bit depending on the vendor. But work within those lengths. Building a deck that's 14 feet wide with composite decking doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no 14 foot boards available, so you're going to end up having to use 16 foot boards, having some waste. Now there's ways you can use that waste up, but as a general rule of thumb, if you're trying to be efficient, both with time and money, work within the lengths that are available. Now, if you're doing wood, of course, many more lengths available. You can find wood decking in 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, you name it. You can get it kind of thing. So work within the available board lengths. That will help to keep your costs down, especially when you're spending anywhere from $4 to $6 to $8 to $10 per linear foot for this composite decking. You don't want to be wasting too much of it. So work within those 12, 16, and 20 foot board lengths. Number 2, work within the joist spans to avoid extra beams or footings. So refer to your local building department's joist spans to decide what joist type or size to use, and then try to work within that. And what I'm saying with this is, if you have a deck that is, say, 14 feet deep, and that's going to allow you to use, let's say, 2x10 joists. But if you push that out to 15 foot, maybe that's a little bit beyond span and it forces you to add an extra beam. Forgive my lengths there. You could probably still do that with 2x10. But the point being, if you push your deck out just a little bit more and that requires you to add a mid-span beam or something, that's a significant cost. So all of a sudden you're adding not only a beam, but an extra row of posts and an extra row of footings. And those footings, depending on where you are, those could be $300, $400, $500 a piece. So that extra foot you're trying to buy yourself on that deck depth is potentially going to cost you thousands of dollars. If you're going to do that, then you might as well go a little bit further and push your joist spans out a little bit more and take advantage of that extra span you have because of that beam. So, we never suggest working at the max length of anything, but certainly you don't really want to be at the very, very minimum either, because then you're kind of wasting money. You're not being very efficient. Number 3, understand the cost of complex shapes or large stairs. We often get people that come into the store and they've got this vision where they want to do some octagonal shape, or they're going around this tree, or they're trying to shape it to something that's in their yard. And it results in this very kind of angular, complex, polygonal shape, which is all cool on paper. But what you don't understand potentially is the structure that's required to support that shape. So once again, if that requires all these extra beams and footings and whatnot, then it's going to jack the price up of that deck. And that could be reduced quite a bit by going with more simple shapes. Another common theme is people coming in wanting these large, grand staircases. And what they don't understand about stairs is that stairs are a giant money pit. They're often a component of the deck that people don't even really consider when they're budgeting out their deck. They come into a store or talk to a friend or contractor and say, yeah, we want to build this 200 square foot deck. And all they're thinking is it's 10 feet out and 20 feet wide, so it's 200 square feet. What they're not considering is the amount of stairs required. That's a significant cost to that deck. And so if you have a standard set of stairs, that alone can be quite an added expense. But if you decide that you want those stairs to run that entire 20-foot width, well, now we're talking about as much material and probably more labor than required for the entire rest of the deck. So it becomes a very significant cost. So if you really want those features, just make sure that you're prepared to include it in your budget, because it will add up to be quite a large cost. Number 4, using your deck boards as fascia. So in number one, I mentioned that, try to work with the lengths of decking that is available. But if you have a scenario where that's not an option and you do have to build that 14-foot deck, one option with those 2-foot cutoffs is to use them as fascia around the edge of the deck in vertical, short little pieces. This does a couple things. It allows you to use up that waste, which was going to end up probably in the trash. So your that sunk cost is now recovered, but also it avoids having to purchase the additional fascia boards, which these days, those things are $150 to $200 for a 12-foot board. And so you can definitely save a ton of money by utilizing that to your advantage. And not only that, not only the scrap piece, let's say your deck is perfectly 12 feet and you're using up all the boards, that's fine, but it's often less expensive, especially on the lower priced composite decking, to use 2 rows of deck board horizontally instead of 1 row of fascia. So the fascia boards are often 11.25 to 12 inches wide. The deck boards are generally 5.25 to 5.5 inches wide. So if you use 2 of them, you're going to be able to cover up that whole 2x8 or 2x10 frame with 2 rows of deck boards. And on a budget board, something that costs maybe $3.50 to $4, I'm using Canadian here because that's where I am. So $3.50 to $4 per linear foot on these deck boards. You need 2 of them, you're talking $7, $8 a linear foot. Well, sometimes those fascia boards are $12 to $15 per linear foot. So you're going to save a lot of money by using 2 rows of deck boards. And here's a life tip. This is my personal preference, but I honestly think it looks better too, to have 2 thinner boards running horizontally than 1 big slab of board. Not only that, but there's some other advantages to doing that. Most notably that you can use your regular plug systems on those deck boards typically. So you're going to get a more hidden fastener. You're also have available the extra lengths. So if your deck is 16 feet wide, you don't have to do a 12-foot fascia board and a 4-foot cutoff or worry about piecing things together. You can just get 16-foot deck boards or 20-foot deck boards to do that all in one span. So that obviously looks better as well. But in addition to that, you have the option of, you have a resulting board that's going to be more stable. So those thicker deck boards are going to get less wavy and oil canny over time than the fascia boards will. Those thinner fascia boards tend to be a lot less stable. And so those 2 rows of deck boards are going to look better longer as well. So it's I think it's something that everybody should consider, is using the deck boards instead of the fascia boards, to be honest. There's a lot of benefits and really no downside to it. Number 5 is to use layout tricks like picture frames and seam boards. So these have different names: seam boards, butt boards, zipper boards, breaker boards, you name it. But what they are is those boards that run perpendicular to the rest of the deck boards that divide up the space. So for example, if you have a deck that's 24 feet wide, you don't have 24-foot boards available. Therefore, you can use 2 rows of 12-foot deck boards with a zipper board or a seam board up the middle and butt them all into that board. And so that allows you to use smaller material more efficiently rather than having cutoffs again. So again, for example, maybe your deck is 17 feet wide, and instead of using 20-foot boards and having cutoffs, you could do a zipper board up the middle, use 2 rows of 8-foot boards and a picture frame around the outside edge, and now you've been able to efficiently use the material rather than having 20-foot boards with cutoffs. So there's ways to do that too, putting in inlays, seam boards, single, double, triple picture frames to make the material work. Again, those 14-foot scenarios, you've got to make up 2 feet if you want to be able to use 12-foot deck boards. It is possible. You probably have to use a 4-ply picture frame, but know that you can use multiple picture frame boards to help make the material work for you and avoid that extra waste. Number 6, make sure to use scraps or bad boards for blocking. So you're going to have some, this is kind of more during the framing stage, but know that when you're framing a deck, you require all sorts of little blocking, whether it's for your picture frame, whether it's your midspan blocking, beam blocking, blocking for your railing if it's surface mount, blocking for railing even if it's framed in. You require a lot of blocking. So if you have, if your deck is 12-foot 6 out and you're using 14-foot joists, take those 1.5 cutoffs and use those for all your blocking. You don't need to order extra lumber. You're going to have enough for that. If you have a bad board in the stack, if you have a board in your pile of 2x8s that's a little bit twisted or not usable for a joist for some reason, it's crowned or bowed too much or something, use that one, mark that one for your blocking, because the twist over 12 feet doesn't matter when you're cutting it into 14.5-foot chunks. So be efficient with that extra waste or those bad boards and cut them up and use them where you can. And that way you ensure you don't have any junk at the end. And finally, number 7, plan your cuts from longer stock. So this is a fairly common thing because, as mentioned earlier, lots of times on composite decks, they're only available in 20-foot lengths for the solid boards, sometimes 16s. They're very odd times 12s, but often you're taking a 20-foot board and you might have to picture frame and you're doing 10 feet on this side and then it jogs over 8 feet and then it goes back 4 feet and then you got some stairs that are all 4 feet. Add that up and make sure that you're going to be able to get all of that out of your 20-foot board. So you don't have to order extra boards if you plan accordingly and make sure that all of your cuts can come out of X number of boards. So add all those cuts up, add it all together. If it works out to be, 53 feet, that you can get that out of 3 20-foot boards. But when it comes time to install them, make sure that you are following your own plan and cutting them appropriately. Because sometimes if it's really close and you make the wrong cut out of the wrong section of material, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself short in the end. So it's important to make sure you kind of plan that out, jot your plan down, so when it comes time to actually doing the building, you're not forgetting how you efficiently laid out those boards. If you follow those 7 tips, when you're going to build your composite deck, you're going to save quite a bit of money. There's a lot of opportunity without that little extra bit of planning or thinking about how this is going to go that can cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And so if you just pay attention to these things, make sure to include them as part of your planning process. When it comes time to build the deck, you're going to find yourself moving a little bit quicker, saving time, and of course, saving a ton of money as well with these 7 efficient little tips. Hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, certainly shoot us a message through any communication means available. We're on Instagram, pop into the store, you name it, we're happy to help. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week.